Hello friends, welcome to the Jazz Ranch, and it's during this downtime in our lives, and I want to give you something encouraging, something positive, and it comes from Bill Evans, and one of the most powerful influences on my life and my music. And you know, he went through a struggle early on to try to figure out whether he should be a jazz musician or a classical musician. I have a quote from him. He said this: "I went through a lot of mental pains and anguish about choosing between jazz and classical." In other words, he didn't know whether to go in a jazz route or a classical route. And he said, "I realized that where I functioned was where I should be. And where I functioned was in jazz, and that was it." That's a direct quote. And you know, had he not chosen that, he might have become someone obscure. But by choosing jazz, he became someone so important in music that we will define jazz piano from his life on into the future forever. He will always be influential. And you know, Ken Burns in his jazz series only talked about him as relating to Miles Davis, so that was a big mistake, I thought. But also another quote from Bill Evans that's maybe even better is this one. He says, "My creed for art in general is that it should enrich the soul. It should teach spirituality by showing a person a portion of himself or herself that he would not have discovered otherwise, a part of oneself you never knew existed." I love that quote. So now I have something for you from a Bill Evans recording of a song from actually a Disney song called Alice in Wonderland, but one of his beautiful recordings, and I'm going to be talking about his particular style, technique, voicings, and so on in this video. So here we go with Alice in Wonderland. This is a song that you can play as a beginner because it's in the key of C and it's mostly 2-5-1s or 2-5-1 or a 6 chord, so on. It doesn't have too many chords. The chords keep repeating. But now if you look at the Bill Evans interpretation of the chords, you get something that is very unique. Even though it's simple in a way, he has figured out a way to play chords and get a sound that is very special and unique to him, and particularly back in the 60s and 50s when he was developing this sound. And now when we listen to it, you know, it may seem, well, it's not too innovative, but back then it was, you know. And the thing about Bill Evans is when he figured out a song, he probably took the regular chord changes or read the sheet music to the song, and then he figured out how he wanted to interpret it harmonically, as well as melodically, and as well as in terms of his rhythm and so on, which I'm not going to get into that much because that's a lot more difficult to interpret. But I do want to talk about his harmonic sense and how it relates to the melody, because that's the thing that's most unique about Bill Evans. He changed the way pianists and musicians conceived of harmony back in the early 60s, late 50s. And after him, everybody copied him. In other words, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, McCoy Tyner. McCoy Tyner kind of went off in a branch with fourth voicings, but actually, if you look at fourth voicings, the first chord in this song that Bill Evans played is a fourth voicing. So he was hip to that way before McCoy was into it. So let's look at the chords individually now, and I'll try to make this interesting from a harmonic point of view and also melodic and his interpretation. So here we go. So now if you look at this song in terms of the sheet music, probably the first chord was a D minor 7. And then it went to a G7. Then to a C chord. So it's just 2-5-1. Now, so what Bill does is he takes that first chord, D minor 7, he translates it into a G sus chord, which has fourth voicing. So the first sound that he gets is beautiful. And he's putting the melody up an octave because you have to in order to get that voicing right in the middle range, you know. So like, instead of playing a D minor 7 in that root position, he's playing actually a G sus 4. Now, that's an important concept to understand because he's starting with the sus 4, but then he alters it on the next measure on the G7 as much as possible by putting in the sharp 5 and the flat 9. Now that is a signature sound of Bill Evans, is the sharp 5 and the flat 9 on the dominant 7th. So if you get that, he's got the sus chord there, and then he's got he actually puts that note in there too, but I can't play it because of my bent finger, but he has that. He also has the B in the left hand too, so you don't really need it in the right hand. But there you see, there's a really altered dominant 7th. So G9 sus, the G7 sharp 5, there's the sharp 5, there's the flat 9. And then the C major 7, resolving it to the 1 chord. And then not staying on the 1, but going to the 4. So that's very common in jazz, is to play the 4 chord in place of the 1 on the second measure. In other words, 1 to 4. It's just one of those progressions that really works. So G sus, G altered, 7 altered. Now, the other interesting thing is that Bill Evans uses what you would call chord segments. He doesn't necessarily play block chords in any position, but he takes just a portion of them. If we invert the C major 7 up to here, and then we take the G out, we have that sound. And he liked that sound. That was a unique sound that Bill Evans had, was that minor second in there, which is kind of really pretty, particularly with a bass player underneath. And then he goes to a root position F major 7. Now why? Because it sounds perfect in that voicing. You see? A major 9 there. The next thing he does, you have a B half diminished chord, and you would have thought that he'd play it that way, you know, in third inversion. But actually what he does is he plays this, another chord segment, and very dissonant. He puts the 9th in there, right against the minor 3rd. And then he has this ascending line melodically against a descending line, complementing it. This comes from his classical training, which has this. He would have thought he would have maybe done it this way, but he does it this way. He likes that dissonance, so there you have it. To this beautiful dominant 7th chord that's altered now. It's an E7, right? So it's in first inversion with the 3rd, the 7th, flat 7 there, and a flat 9, 3rd, augmented 5th. So that's a signature chord of Bill Evans, is the flat 9, sharp 5 alteration of the dominant 7th. Then he has these beautiful sounding thirds to an A minor 7 there, and then an A7 altered here. Now he's altered it in this way, that he has the flat 9 and the flat 5. So here you have a flat 9 and a flat 5. But he thinks about every chord that he's going to play and plays the most perfect sounding voicing for every chord. In other words, Bill always finds the best sounding chords, and they're always altered, particularly on the dominant 7th. So take that as a rule. I will give you the rule. Always alter the dominant 7ths. Add something, a sharp 5, a flat 9, a sharp 9. Usually in this order. The flat 9 would be first, then maybe an augmented 5th or a flat 5, and then maybe a sharp 9 after that. Or maybe a flat 13. You know, some other alteration. But you never want to play a dominant 7th straight with no alteration. You have to at least add some form of a 9 or some other coloration of it, like a sharp 5 or a flat 5 or a sharp 11. And, you know, the next thing that he does is he plays this figure. So what he's doing is he's harmonizing that melody line like this. He's harmonizing it like this. Okay, so what is that? That's the D minor 6. There's the A7, dominant 7th, approaching, the diminished chord approaching the inversion of the D minor 6. And then he takes the top note, second note from the top, and puts it down in the bass. So he has this. So that note goes down here and takes it out. And then the next one takes that out, puts it down there. So that's, if you've watched my videos, that's the Barry Harris diminished 6th scale, and he's applying it there, and he uses that a lot in a drop 2. Now what is a drop 2? It just means he's taking that second note from the top, if you're voicing it like that. So the rule is, if it's a chord tone, you play it as a 6th chord. If it's a non-chord tone, you play it as a diminished chord. So if you play it an inversion of a 6th chord, then you play it as a 6th chord. If you play an inversion of the diminished chord, you play another diminished chord. And it goes on like that. You see, there it is through the whole scale, which you could call the F scale, which is relative to D minor. In this case, it's a D minor. So now he takes that note there and he puts it on the bottom, and you have this beautiful sound. That's a classic sound. Classical musicians, popular musicians, you know, your Cole Porters, the Irving Berlins, they've been using the drop 2, this particular type of use of a passage on a scale going through a 6th chord to a diminished chord and so on, and diminished approaches. They've been using those for years. So this is something you should learn as being an automatic thing you should know to play jazz or to play music in general, you know, popular music particularly. Classical players do it too. So we go, there's the D minor to a G13. Now you will always alter the dominant chord, so you will never hear this. You always hear, you put a 9 in there and with a 13, you know. And then on the C major 6/9, you'll get this. They'll add that 13 in there, and then it'll put a, what is that chord? Well, that is a B flat approaching an A7, which is the 5 of the D minor, but also an altered 6 of the scale, which is C. Then it has the sharp 9 in it again. But this is a approach chord, which is a tritone substitute. In other words, it would be E minor, going to E7, A7, but now it's a half step. So he uses these tritone substitutes a lot. That's another signature sound of Bill Evans, is the tritone substitute. So you want to watch my videos on that to understand how that works. But it's a beautiful way of connecting melody notes with unusual chords and really interesting connections to whatever chord is coming up next. So now that same concept of changing things occurs in the bridge, because it's just a repeat harmonically like this. Same 2, 5, 1, 6, right? So how do we make it different? Well, what he does something really very Bill Evans-ish. Instead of playing this, he goes like this. See, that's a Bill Evans voicing. Now, what is it? He's playing a dominant 7th with an augmented 5th, but he's putting in the left hand. He's not playing the root in the bass, because the bass player is playing it. But he gets this nice close harmony here, and then he does this beautiful sounding chord, which is a tritone substitute. You know, he would be like normally to G7, but he's doing the tritone substitute, which is up a flat 5. So he goes like this, down a half step, and then he plays that voicing. Now I love that voicing. What is it? It's a D flat dominant 7th. There's your sharp 9, and here's your 13 up there. You see, so that's a real Bill Evans sounding chord. Whoop. When you find a good voicing, try to play it. But you see, it sounds perfect in that register right there. Sounds pretty good there too. But then it loses its quality as you go lower and as you go higher. But right there, it sounds perfect, and he's found that. And then he goes to this. So he's got a lot of, seconds in his harmony, and then minor seconds. So like he has this simple major second, that beautiful D flat 7 sharp 9, and then this major second there, and that minor second there. That's signature Bill Evans sound. And the next thing is that Barry Harris 6 diminished scale again. And then he uses these big chords, which are sus chords. He'll always put that minor second in there whenever he can. And then here you have the only thing that changes in the whole tune, where it goes for a 2/5 into the 3 chord. So it goes F sharp, B. Now how does he handle that? Well, he's putting his sharp 5 in there and his flat 9 again. In other words, he's not doing that. He's putting that augmented 5th in there, right there. And then here again, which is a flat 9 up here. And then he's putting the sharp 5 in there. There's the sharp 5, you see? So every dominant 7th chord he's altering, and that's what you need to do. And then an E minor 7, there's that flat 9 again, altering every dominant rule. Always alter the dominant 7th to get a jazz sound. He's thought out every chord harmonically in this song, and he's figured it out as how it should sound. You might ask what made Bill Evans so special in the early 60s, late 50s. It was a combination of his complexity and his minimalism. In other words, he played very simple, like chords like this, and then he played very complicated things. He could play both. He had a huge range of harmonic concepts and melodic concepts and so on. And there's also his rhythms. He played, 3 against 4 and then 4 against 3 and different things. So the next thing he did was, he's on a pedal tone, but is he just doing this? No, he's going D minor with a G in the bass to an A7 flat 9 with a G in the bass to a D minor 7 inverted in the bass to an A7 flat 9 in the bass, and then the D minor, and then he puts in a tritone substitute there. You see, so he's figured out every detail of this song to sound perfect. And then the next thing that happens is just he puts all of it up an octave. He still has that kind of voicing with that flat 9 and that, that, in this particular case, it's a flat 5 actually. And then that close harmony, and then this diminished 6th scale, tritone substitute, A minor 11 with that half step in there. So that's the Bill Evans sound. I think it's unique in its own way. Nobody actually plays like him exactly. There's people that are close, like Keith Jarrett's probably the closest right now. Fred Hirsch, I mean, everybody that came after him was influenced by him, and they went off on their own paths to create their own sound. But they all learned from Bill Evans. And of course, as well as Bud Powell and Horace Silver and many of the other greats, we learned different things, and then you put them together and you create your own sound. So we'll wrap up now, because I think this has been long enough for one lesson. And please write to me if you enjoyed this and let me know, because there's so much competition on YouTube now that you have like hundreds of piano teachers you can study with. So if you're like me, you are in that elite class of people that enjoy my particular style. And I would love to hear from you. Please write to me. Until next time, if you would like an extension on this video, let me know. And until next time, I'll say swing loose. And here we go with the wrap-up. Signing off from the Jazz Ranch. Please write to me. I'd love to hear from you. Be safe, stay well, and until next time, Ernie Dressel always said, swing loose. And we'll see you next time around. Bye-bye.